in America, there is a direct correlation between the health of the local business community and public policy of that community as to whether they have, that city or state has a policy that ensures that minority businesses are included in contracting. New York City has never had such a policy because our previous mayor, Ed Koch, was absolutely avidly opposed to what he called quotas. And so there were some little programs, but New York City grants $5 billion a year in contracts, and those are tax dollars. And black people pay taxes, and Latinos pay taxes, and there is no reason to believe that there should not be a city policy that ensures that minority businesses get some of that $5 billion. Without that policy, it will not happen. We get less than 1% of that $5 billion right now. And David Dinkins, if once he does the predicate study that the Supreme Court is requiring for set-asides, is going to have to bite the bullet and develop a policy which ensures that black people get economic power in addition to political power in the city.
Jump in.
One sentence, Harriet, to define a subtlety, because I am in favor of floors and not ceilings. Ceilings are what keep people out. Floors are what make sure that due representation is in. I think we can distinguish between these two so that tiny little minority groups such as the Jewish people, who are infinitesimal on the broad scale in this country, are not going to get hit disproportionately by a policy that you don't intend to hurt anybody. So what would be wrong with defining a floor rather than a ceiling?
I'm in favor of any quota being a floor, because I think that any set-aside policy that's out there now should be a floor and not a ceiling. Okay. I certainly agree with that. I think all blacks would agree with that.
And I think perhaps that is the problem, semantics here, because I don't think anybody is looking for the floor-ceiling argument. But you're totally against quotas, are you not, Rabbi?
Well, let me try another part of the House. I think Harriet is exactly right. I think she's pushing through a door that will soon be wide open in New York and around the country. To be against quotas doesn't mean to be against what Harriet is advocating.
But she suggests that it cannot be done without quotas.
Well, maybe we should spend the rest of the time defining what a quota is or what it is not. But to include minorities, which also include women, women's owned businesses, and black-owned businesses, and is absolutely necessary in any city that depends on tax money, as every city does. So therefore, I see that when that comes, and it's going to come in this city, and Harriet's exactly right, I think that it's a door that will be open. But I want to just say, I think Jews and blacks have two different views of government. I think there's a difference. If I can make a sweeping statement, I think Jews generally see that the job of government is to be very assertive in clearing out, to use that cliche, making the field level for all to play. The field is not level, clearly, for a lot of groups in this country, for a lot of people. Level meaning equal opportunity, equal chances. I think blacks generally see, and my two colleagues here can certainly correct me, generally see that the job of government is much more than that. It is to right wrongs. It is group rights. It's to make groups whole and full who have been discriminated against, to compensate for them. And that's not semantics. There's a difference in the view of how government is supposed to operate in this country. We both want government to do right, but I think there are differences in what we mean by it.
Let me do this. Let me go to the studio audience, and then I'd like to get to Mr. Gordon, because he suggested he didn't necessarily agree with the question of quotas and whether we need to do that. Yes, sir, please.
The person on the panel had mentioned that Jews and blacks are both victimized, but I want to remind him and the audience that the history of Hollywood, dominated by Jews, have denigrated blacks throughout its its filming, and that's a cause for victimization coming from the Irish and the Italian. And not only that, many ethnic groups, white ethnic groups, were shown in a denigrated state, again run by Jewish production lords. And I also, since I'm from New York and I've seen what happened in the city, I blame the educational system for what has happened to many black and Hispanic youth. And the so-called Jews do run the educational system.
Let me see if I can do this. I want to give you all an opportunity, because that's one of the questions that is constantly raised in this issue as to whether or not Jews indeed run, quote, the media and put images out there that are not flattering to African Americans and other minorities. Who wants to tackle that one?
Well, the question as to whether or not the Jews own the media, the banking institutions, we have an international cabal to take over the world. You listen to all of this, and we make up 2% of the population of the United States, an infinitesimal fraction of what we are in the entire world. And I wish we did have some of that power that people talk about. Maybe we'd be able to right some of the wrongs.
You don't...
It is ridiculous.
Go ahead.
It is ridiculous to assume that the Jews, by their number or whatever their economic positions are, and or political positions are, could run the world and control the media. There are the major media in this country are owned by national and international corporate entities, be it Sony or whoever now. There were lots of Jews in the entertainment world, and they did stereotype the blacks at one time, but they did it at a time when it was acceptable.
Each other, ourselves.
Why do you think that...
and they did that.
Why do you think it persists?
It persists, but it also, as I heard the other day, a little old man speaking in a Yiddish accent is talking about, and it made him look like a cowed old Jew that came in, who had a meek guy that we had as a stereotype of 50, 60, 80 years ago. They do this. I decry it. I think it's wrong, but it is not a Jewish enforcement. It's not the Jews that are doing this. It is what they're doing is selling media. They're selling media time. They're selling advertising, and they're catering to an audience.
Letty, why do you think? Why do you think it persists?
Well, you've heard Letty earlier talk about this group that we co-founded that has been together. It was 3 black women, 3 Jewish women, and 1 Lebanese. One of the things that I was struck by in that group, and we struggled on this issue, is that the black perception of Jews as being all-powerful, omnipotent almost, way out of proportion to their numbers in this country, and indeed controlling certain industries like the media, like book publishing, like Hollywood, like entertainment, that sort of thing. And the Jews themselves, and as a black woman, this struck me so much, the Jews themselves, and it was incredulous, seeing themselves as fragile and vulnerable. If there's one lesson that I saw from Letty that I was finally persuaded that she really believed, is that Jews see themselves as vulnerable, because no matter what, and I'm not presuming to speak for anybody, this is the lesson that she taught me in this group. It appears to me that as Letty has talked to us and the other Jews in that group, that no matter how powerful Jews are, first of all, it is in their interest to some degree to be seen as powerful because it can stave off some enemies. Is that correct?
Right.
Secondly, though, that no matter what achievements they may have, they feel because they're afraid that history is going to repeat itself. There have been other times and other places when Jews have achieved, have accomplished, and it's been snatched away from them. And there's that fear, however irrational it may seem to black people, that it's likely to happen again. Now, that is one of the things that I learned in that group. I don't know that we can say blanket that Jews control any industry, but I know from the black perspective, and Letty has written on this, that we as however many percent we are of the population, 24, 30 million black people, still don't have a black senator. We have 1 black governor, and Jews who are only 2% have senators, governors, Congress people, which seem way out of proportion to their number. They seem to us, from our perspective, who are still without power in this society, as far as I'm concerned, or very little. We are looking at a very small fraction of people who seem to influence a great deal of things in their favor.
I've got to go to a break. I'm going to see if I can... We are talking about black-Jewish relationship. That is one of the things that was just raised, the question of the Jewish power frame in the media. Let me go to this gentleman because he's been very patient. I thank you for being patient. Your question, sir.
Thank you. My name is I Priest Abba Yamalak. Now, what I'd like to ask the panel, especially the so-called white people up there, is that they're not Jews. The Negroes in America are the real Jews, okay? And America gives $40 billion to Israel every year, okay, a welfare state. The Negroes in America suffer. They are being oppressed by the so-called Jews, because the so-called Jews rule the world, okay? The Illuminati, okay? Como, so-called Jews, the Vatican, you rule the world, okay? Now, what are you going to do about the conflicts in America? Because you're not the Jews. So what are you going to do when the Negroes find out that they are the real Jews and you're not? Because you're not Jews.
So what's your question? Do you have a question for the panel, though?
Yeah. What are you going to do when the Negroes wake up and find out that you told them a lie? What are you going to do when the Negroes woke up and find out that you tamper with the Bible? Because you tamper with the Bible. You took out the truth of the Bible and put a lie in the Bible.
Let me see if any one of them want to try to answer that.
I have one comment to make.
Go ahead.
If we're not Jews, what in the world have been taking this suffering and this beating and oppression and Holocaust for all these years? Let me out of this struggle. Let me out.
Okay, yes, sir.
How does it affect black-Jewish relationship then? Okay, because you're not Jews, you're converts. You're Khazars. Okay, it came out of the blacks, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, out of Georgia, Russia. The Caucasian mountains. You're Caucasians.
Now let me see if they're going to be able to. I think he answered it to the best of his ability. Rabbi, would you like to tackle that at all, or you just want us to pass on?
We could be here all night on it. I didn't quite understand. Mario Cuomo is a Jew, and the Vatican is Jewish. You lost me a little bit there. I want to, but I think I understand. Whatever we are, wherever we came from, whoever any of our groups are, here we are, as Harriet said, it's 1991. We have real problems. We have economic problems. We have job problems. We have housing problems. We have education problems. You and I afterwards can sit down and we can go through the books and talk about history. Nobody's playing a trick on anybody. We're here to try to solve some serious problems in this city, in this country. So, if I'm a convert to Judaism 17 generations ago, okay, but I'm a Jew today. I agree with my brother over there. For Adolf Hitler, it didn't make any difference. Didn't make any difference whether we're from the. Where did you say? I didn't get it all.
We'll move on, and if you want to discuss it with him, go ahead. Yes, sir.
I'd be happy to take it up with you afterwards, but tonight we have some serious problems, not historical problems of that kind. We're trying to help people survive in a very difficult America. In a recession America, in a racist America, and an America that still has anti-Semitism.
Let's see if we can do this.
That's my agenda.
This side of the floor. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question for Rabbi Rudin. Early in the program, you stated that we needed to have understandings. My question to you is, what is your understanding of the Jewish participation in slave trade, and what is your understanding of the involvement of Aaron Lopez, who controlled over half the slave trade, who was a Sephardic Jew out of Rhode Island?
Well, I want to come back to what Harry said, that everybody has stereotypes, everybody has mythologies. Let's talk about, if you want to talk about slave trading, talk about the people who really were involved in slave trading, which were mostly white Christians, overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly Christian. Some of the New England pietists who hid behind their wonderful religion as if they were so self-righteous, engaged in slave trade and the rum and the triangle. We know about that. Let's get beyond the mythologies and the stereotypes. Look at, for instance, on slave trading, look at who really profited. Look at who made the money. It were white slave owners, overwhelming majority, both in the South who owned the slaves and the people in the North who made money. One of the biggest mythologies is that it was only in the South of this country that they profited. They profited in the North as well.
Let me go to this side of the floor. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask anyone on the panel, since the topic is conflict compromise, what is the great need for compromise when blacks have so many problems right now? We have problems losing jobs with the last hired, first fired. We have problems with housing. We have the assaulted women, and so on and so forth. I mean, you talk about the need for coalition and what have you, which is great, but it seems to me that blacks have so many other problems that have to be addressed.
Mr. Robinson, what about that?
So do answer me, why compromise?
Why the need, and that's a good question, why the need for an alliance today when blacks, as she suggested, need to perhaps get their backyard in order before they go team up?
There's no question that the pathologies of society that affect the black community are uppermost in African Americans' minds and what we have to do. But I say keep it in your memory bank that a world which was indifferent to the deaths of 6 million Jews certainly is not going to be a world that is worrying about African Americans. So that you need alliances, you need to work together. You don't do anything in a vacuum. We are not large enough as a group, as a voting bloc, as an economic bloc to do things by ourselves. There are certainly factors that that come into play in terms of our own self-determination, into self-help programs that we certainly can do in this community, in the black community, and a lot more is being done. Absent that paternalistic point that we talked about before, a lot of it has transpired, but you do need partners. You don't know. David Dinkins did not get elected mayor of New York on the black vote alone. The gentleman that was just elected in Kansas City didn't do it on the black vote alone. Tom Bradley. Certainly, Doug Wilder didn't get elected in governor of Virginia on
But to be fair about that particular question, there are those who suggested that Jews did not at that point vote in the same block in terms of sheer numbers as they had before with other Democratic candidates. Let me keep that on the board, take a break, and one of the other things I want to come back and look at is whether it indeed is a question of black and Jewish relationships versus black-white relationships. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't forget the 1-900 poll. Firestorm, he finds himself in being a black mayor in a city where there's a large Jewish population, and blacks having a question as to whether or not he has sold them out, if you will. What about the question of black progress and being involved with your constituency and then being the mayor of the entire city? These are things that were fought for, but obviously many, or I shouldn't say many, a number of blacks in New York City feel that he indeed has thrown to the side the concerns of black Americans or black New Yorkers and has looked to the Jewish problem all too often.
I hope you're not looking in my direction to answer that question. This is a difficult situation, but I'd like to try to redefine some of the terms, and you alluded to it in an earlier segment. First of all, outside of this discussion and some other discussions like it, which are not very many, this is a non-issue in a lot of the black community in terms of the black-Jewish difficulties. Black people see, I think, black people see Jews as white people. They don't see them as distinct as anybody else. And for the past 12 years, black people, we have always, but especially for the past 12 years under the Republican regimes, we have been getting our tails kicked in all aspects of this society. And we are desperate for coalitions or alliances. To say that black people are unwilling to go into coalitions or alliances, Harry, we all know that we need friends in order to move forward. But, you know, we got to take the position that other people take. We don't have any permanent enemies or any permanent friends. We have permanent interests. And those people who are willing to stand with us and our interests, those are our friends at that time. On other issues, if they don't stand with us, then they can't be our permanent friends. There's some assumption that whatever happened in the past, there should always be going forward this willingness to be tolerant. I think that most black people, once you go outside of New York City, or maybe Florida or other population centers where there are a large percentage of Jews, most black people don't see white Jews any different from anybody else. And to the extent that they do, they may expect more from Jews because we keep hearing this stuff that Jews have been our friends. So the issue is, well, how are they our friends and what are they doing for us now? And I think that's a legitimate question to ask.
Go ahead.
Well, I couldn't agree more with Harriet, because wherever I go and talk to Jews, I always say Charles de Gaulle is the one who said France has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, has permanent interests. Jewish people certainly would share that view. And I don't think we ever used the word up here compromise. I don't think we ever talked about compromise. Talk about coalition, work together on where we can work together. Also, one of the mythologies I have to deal with, and Harriet alluded to it, the people who hate Jews and blacks don't think either of us are very mature people as communities. We're both grown-up men and women. Our communities are very mature. We know what we want. We understand ourselves. And it's fun to play the two groups against each other. That's what we see in America. And politicians do it, and bankers do it, and lots of other people do it. So, of course, we have permanent interest. And one of the interests is that will lead us into coalition. But one of the things in America that we find over and over again is they hate us both, different ways, different forms of discrimination.
But with that understanding, is there concern or are Jews taken aback when, as Harriet just suggested, blacks see you as whites first.
Well,
Plain and simple.
I'd like to respond to that, because it's interesting to hear Harriet say so, and it also points up the sense of vulnerability on the part of the Jews. There are areas which I go, my friends go, we walk in, it's blacks, Jews, and whites. You don't see it that way, but we as Jews see ourselves separately. When I went to law school, it was the blacks and Jews, we were together, and the whites. They were laughing at us. They were pointing at us as the one. And don't you forget it. And I don't want to forget it. We need each other. Why? How? I don't know. You're right. The word compromise was not used. Coalition. Ma'am, you asked the question why we need coalitions, whether if your concern or the concern of the black people is more employment, more employment opportunity, all education, all those things, you need someone in your corner. We feel this vulnerability all the time, and we feel that we need coalitions. Maybe we think we need you more than you think you need us, but we feel vulnerable, whatever our economic basis. And I want to prove it by one other thing. I want to take Ed on the question of the Jewish bloc vote. And I say to you, Ed, yes, perhaps, no doubt, let's say no doubt, the percentage of that bloc vote, which elected Mayor Bradley in the city I come from, which elected Mayor Dinkin in this city, which elected Mayor Washington in, may he rest in peace, in Chicago, it was the Jewish vote that got him in there. Not the blacks alone. Not the blacks alone. Not the Jews alone. Not the blacks alone. The coalition. The coalition. You can have your agenda. I can have my agenda. But only together can we face them out there. Nowhere else in this country is anybody meeting and talking about black-Jewish relations or black-Irish relations, as we said, black-white relations. It isn't even on their agenda at all. Why it's on ours is only because we need each other, and we keep bringing it up all of the time.
I've got to get a phone call in. We've got a phone call from Temple Hills, Maryland, I understand. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. With respect to the earlier comment about the Black Caucus and the Jewish community voting in lockstep, well, the black community tends to see that more so as black politicians courting Jewish money than remaining loyal to black issues. And that's just the way we look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to make a comment about the coalition. I think we have to be honest as Jews that this is not a symmetrical coalition, that we have more economic power in this nation. It would be absurd to deny it. It would be absurd to say we have equal needs. We don't.
So what do blacks bring to the table for Jews then?
What blacks can bring to the table, what we ask, what I have been praying for and hoping for and working for, is an understanding of the sense that the needs of the black community, the hunger, the poverty, the fact that so many black babies are being born undernourished and don't have a decent start, all of that, those are pragmatic issues. Those are life and death issues. They're issues for now. I understand that. Our issues are fears of the future. And I know they don't seem in the least bit comparable. But we feel, because we saw it happen in Poland and we saw it happen in Germany, and we know it can happen here. You know it can't happen here? It can happen here. And so I believe that we need to raise up the black community, to give the black community as much of our whatever we have to offer, to give Jewish money to develop black power. I say it that way, right straight out. I say it straight out because I truly believe that together, if you as a community would understand that we're both in it together.
I tell you what, Letty, and I think we're finally getting to. I will. I've got to go to that we've been trying to all night. That's one of the black people's contentions. That in this sense, if you just allow us to help you, you see what I'm saying? If you allow us to help you versus, well, you know, help yourselves, which is what black people are saying they need to do.
I'm not saying that we do anything for anyone else. I'm saying when you say, well, what's in it for Jews, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think what's in it for Jews is to live in a world where there's more equality and where there's more humanity. That's what's in it for Jews. That's what it means to be a Jew. I also feel that the self-interest part of it is if we are ever threatened in the future, we're going to need our friends, you know, in a way that certainly, why shouldn't we be able to say to each other what each other's honest needs are? we may need black political power on our side. I think if it's fair enough if we have something economic to offer now, that's what we offer.
But I think the Jews forget that while
I got to hit this break. I'm sorry, and we got to get these folks who've been standing here, and I've got to go to break. We'll be back in just a minute.
White people do. The misperception.
Please don't forget to vote. Do you think a partnership between blacks and Jews is necessary? Call 1-900-288-0804. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Mary Lacey Madison, and I'm from Marcus Garvey's area. We did not receive the 40 acres of land and the mule. You know what happened? You know what happened then? Then we had something, Harlem River Consumers Cooperative. 16 teenagers raised $10,000 in 6 weeks right there in Harlem, knocking on the doors at $5 a share. It was a $2 million a year business, and the antitrust law was violated. My mother taught me that the Jews were our friends. I personally went to the Jewish press and gave them the material because nobody else was doing anything. We went down to Washington, D.C. for the cooperative hearing, and that supermarket was taken from us. We were doing so well, the government gave us a couple of blocks of land. The Jewish people would not help it. Every time we try to do something for ourselves, positive, economically speaking, it is taken from us, and you don't do anything. Personally, I think this whole thing is a farce. Leave us alone. Leave us alone. Don't stop me. Don't stop me. Hold it. I remember the first day my mother went to vote in the 20s. We had to dress up and go on the porch and wave to her. Daddy always gave the boys money so they could pay the poll taxes and they could vote. And I'm 80 years old. Why am I voting? Leave us alone, assalamu alaikum, and let us do what we want to do.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Is that really the answer? I mean, is that what you want us to bring back? That you don't want anything at all? Nothing. Nothing? Just...
Well, it's a very good idea. The tragedy is the world will not leave either of us alone.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying the world won't leave us alone.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
To answer the
Go ahead.
Nobody.
Ma'am.
To answer the question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Your question. Go ahead. Your question.
To answer the question, should there be a coalition between blacks and Jews? The answer is no. So I'm saying we should not make, a coalition a priority on the black agenda in the year 2000 or the year 1991.
Why do you think that?
Why? There are 50 million black people in North America alone. We have the numbers to produce our own food, our own clothing, our own shelter, our own transportation, education, entertainment, and economy, so on and so forth. And I think an issue here, that we have to consider is compensation. Okay, Hitler killed 6 million Jews, in World War II. I'm sorry about that. But Jews have more than been compensated for their loss. Hundreds of millions, of black people have been deliberately and maliciously murdered. We have not been compensated for our loss.
Before I go over, let me let one of these folks address that before I go over to the other side. That is a question, the idea of Israel getting, I think it's
reparations, as the Japanese, you'll recall, also will be getting reparations. If African Americans were to receive reparations for their slave labor in this country, we would be light years ahead of probably any other group in this country at this particular point in time. But I think what we have to keep in mind is the perceptions. And who is benefiting from this? What is the real group that benefits from confrontations between blacks and Jews, or the group that pits blacks and Jews against one another? Early on, I said something about the media and how the media continues to single out these two groups and to focus upon them. But I think that you have to look at Harriet mentioned the 12 years of the Reagan administration or thereabouts before, and what happened to the black community in this country because of it. Who really benefits? When, for example, I recall Congressman Bill Gray received an award in Philadelphia from the Philadelphia Board of Rabbis. Howard Volpe was a Jewish congressman from Michigan, made the presentation to him. He went and made a terrific speech on anti-Semitism, on racism, on Jewish racism, on black racism, etc., black anti-Semitism. And none of the mainstream media reached out to cover any of it in Philadelphia. A couple of weeks later, I think something did appear in the Jewish Exponent, but none of the mainstream media bothered to cover a positive factor. Yet the shrillest voice that is raised in the community, if it says anything that is remotely anti-Semitical, is jumped on by the media and is repeated and repeated and repeated. And again, who benefits from that?
Let me see if I can keep to his question, though, which is an important one. The idea, and there are a lot of people, not just blacks, but a lot of people are now raising the question of $3 billion to Israel.
He raised another issue, though, and there's two elements.
But let me see if I can stay with that one first, because that one has not been addressed. And any of you folks need to address that. The idea of $3 billion to Israel for 4 million people, and Africans, black Africans, 500 million people, get $1 billion. What about that question?
I think it's reprehensible.
Well, I don't agree with that at all.
I think that more money should go to Black Africa. I don't think that Israel should be seen as another side of a balance scale. I don't think you take from Israel to give to Black Africa. I think you recognize the needs of each.
Okay. Well, I tell you what. Before we really get deep into it, I got to go to break. We'll come back and we'll deal with that question. We'll be back in just a moment. That gentleman speaks to the issue that we were just talking about. There's a gentleman who says he doesn't care. He needs a job, he needs good housing. And a lot of people are saying there's a lot of housing, there's a lot of jobs, and $3 billion to Israel. Now, you said you wanted to deal with that.
Yeah, I think you have to see it that $3 billion goes to Israel. I certainly don't think it's reprehensible. Over $3 billion goes to Egypt, goes to Jordan, goes to Saudi Arabia.
It's reprehensible that $3 billion went to Israel. I think it's reprehensible that $1 billion goes to half a billion people in Black Africa.
I'm coming to what we have to do. If we feel that way, then it's the job of the U.S. Congress to vote it. And how do people in the U.S. Congress get elected? They get elected by us. Who sets the public policy? The people that we elect. So if we want to increase aid to Black Africa, then it's the job in coalition. I hate to use that word, in coalition. If you want us to leave it alone, then the world will go on just as it's going on. If you say leave us alone, then there's not going to be any more money going to Black Africa. The only way more money is going to go is by coalition building, by electing people, by picketing, lobbying, and making our views known. It's not a complicated business. It's an American political system, which is and this money is voted on by members of Congress.
And let us not say, though, Israel does get the lion's share of it, and all the numbers that we've seen do not indicate that Egypt gets
Egypt gets the same amount of aid, over $3 billion that Israel does.
Let me just introduce a panelist who, because of New York traffic, was not able to get to us. A very familiar face, former Congressman Walter Fauntroy, and a person who's been deeply involved in the civil rights movement, the coalition of the past in terms of Jews and blacks. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir.
Am I on?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to clear something up. I heard you mention the black agenda. Black people are becoming more spiritual in the 90s. It's the Most High agenda. Black people are not just looking at what the white man is doing. They're looking at what the Most High is going to do in their case. The fact is that the so-called white man that claims to be a Jew has stolen our land. That land belongs to the black people you see here in America called the real Jews, the Hebrew Israelites. You became converts to Judaism during the Greek and Roman Empire. The white people that you see sitting on the stage are Greek and Roman babies. Their ancient names were the Edomites. Getting back to the civil rights issue, right, about the civil rights issue when the Jews helped the blacks, the Jews were using the blacks as foot soldiers. And at the end of the civil rights issue, the Jews control all the minority programs in America. They use the black people, and you're being used by these white devils, because that's what you are.
Now, let me let Reverend Fauntroy address that. Reverend, now you've heard what the gentleman said. You were part of You're part of the movement. What about what he says, that blacks in turn were being used by Jews to get what they needed at that point and then let the blacks go?
Well, I don't really care to comment on that. I do want to comment on the fact that it's important on the question of the flow of resources, that a black agenda for the year 2000 include moving the world away from a process which is underway now of financial resources going west-east and no longer north-south. That is, against the background of my experience as chairman of a subcommittee on international development, finance, trade, and monetary policy, I can tell you that both the development establishments of the world and the financial establishments of the world have decided that the whites of Eastern Europe are better trained and will work for less than those in the South. And I think our agenda moving toward the year 2000 must be one of seeing to it that both development and investment resources flow north-south from the developed nations of the North to Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America. And in pursuit of that quest, we do need more equity in terms of what the role of this country is in meeting the needs of the people in the Middle East and in Africa and the Caribbean.
Mr. Robinson, let me see if I can ask you to address that question. I mean, the paternalistic attitude that is perceived, if nothing else, in this audience seems to continue, and there is a reason, I would think, for it. Do you think that that is the case, that many blacks have just felt like you used us to gain what you needed at that particular time, and now you've forgotten us in times of need?
I think the perception exists. There's no question about that.
Is it real, as far as you're concerned?
No, I don't think so as far as I'm concerned. My personal opinion, no. But I think that the reality of politics...
Let him finish, folks.
Like I said, the reality of politics, the reality of economics, the reality of how you have to survive in this country perhaps makes it more advantageous for groups to disassociate themselves, and they have done that with blacks. We know this. But you still, again, I go back to the point, you can't do it alone. Now, the one differential that Jews have, and regardless of the perception of their, either somebody saying they're not Jews or whatever, but the real thing about Jews and blacks in this country is the distinction.
Folks, we're going to ask you to be, if nothing else, cordial to the people who are speaking, as we did not interrupt any of you. Okay?
Is that the Jews have had the protective coloration of being white in this country. We know that this is a racist country, that the country was weaned on, whites are weaned on racism in America, and that when the United States was founded with its Constitution, the Founding Fathers talked about equality, they talked about freedom, they talked about a number of things, but we were only 3/5 of a people. So as a consequence, the history is different. When you juxtapose some of the questions that are coming from the audience, you still have to realize when quotas came up, for example, and Jews are against quotas, but I like what Letty said about the floor versus the ceiling. The one thing in those the prestigious institutions that Jews are trying to get into, that they were kept out of, the Ivy League schools, the medical schools, and so on, at least they were kept out of in great numbers, at least they were there. The quota that existed was made up of the Jews. We were not even there to be a quota. So that has to be kept in the memory bank and in your memory genes as you look at what the two groups are. And I still say that it's a black, I go along with the point about being a black-white issue, or African-American versus white issue versus blacks-Jews.
You want to say?
Well, I'll go back to the young man's comment when he talked about the proportion of resources of foreign aid going to Israel. One of the things he said was the black agenda for the year 2000. I agree with you. I don't think the black-Jewish relationship has high priority for the year 2000. There are just too many other issues. I mean, yes, it's important to identify common areas where we can work together for common good. But at the same time, while we're sitting up here talking about black-Jewish relations, that's a non-event for most black people. We're talking about black-Asian relations, black-Latino relations, black-white women relations. We are getting squeezed from all sides, and to sit here and be forced into this narrow lens, which we're going to argue about the origins of Jews, if wherever they originated, what is it going to do for your pocketbook? How are you going to make it to the year 2000? That's the issue. Now,
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's time for that. I am not saying that that is not a legitimate discussion. I am just saying that black people have enemies in every community. We have problems in every community, and I refuse to take the black problem that are facing us in this country right now and condense it down through a lens which says it's a black-Jewish thing. It is not. It is blacks against everybody as far as I'm concerned, and we better be prepared to face all of those people.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, I sense that one of the things that have outraged the black community in relationship with the Jewish community is the paternalistic relationship that the Jewish community have taken in terms of determining who is an acceptable black leader versus who is an unacceptable black leader. Case in point with Minister Louis Farrakhan, who for the many of the masses of black people, he represents their legitimate needs and aspirations. But yet because of his tone and because of his misunderstanding by the Jewish community, he has been lambasted and maligned as being someone, a new Hitler. And this is totally erroneous. Also, I think the alliance can never really be successful unless we break up the type of alliance that we so-called have, such as the relationship of an employer to an employee, the relationship of a maid to someone who is more in the position of being a master, the relationship of a landlord to a tenant. And as long as black people are subordinate and subservient in those relationships, there can be no real alliance. It's a pseudo-alliance.
You want to deal with that, please?
Well, one of the ground rules that I think we should all try to work on is we don't choose leaders of other communities. And now, when Louis Farrakhan speaks out, which is his perfect right to do so, we also have a perfect right in America in the marketplace of ideas. Anyone who chooses to be a leader must be subjected to the same, and the Bible teaches us the same weights and measures for everybody. So we judge him, we judge George Bush, we judge...
Let me see if I can...
In other words, Louis Farrakhan or anybody else can be a leader. That's up to the black to decide
but
that.
What about the question? Let me see if I can just play devil's advocate, Rabbi.
Once he makes his point in public, then everybody in the public marketplace has a right to say, yes, he's right, yes, he's wrong, I don't agree, I do agree. If you want to be a leader, you have to take the heat of criticism in public.
I think his question, though, hits to the issue that there were a number of Jewish organizations that went across the country and demanded that other black leaders denounce him. Not that you couldn't say, Farrakhan, you were wrong for saying that you went to Los Angeles and demanded that Tom Bradley denounce him, that Jesse Jackson denounce him. A number of Jewish organizations. What about that question?
When a person who comes
Let's
forward...
give her a chance.
When a person who comes forward as a leader, I think we recognize his or her viability as a leader when we take seriously everything that he or she says. In the case of Minister Farrakhan, I take seriously the black self-help message. I welcome it just as an observer. I think it's a smart message. When I hear Louis Farrakhan call my faith a gutter religion, I speak...
Let's not...
I speak out, and I hope that black leaders will speak out. I hope that black leaders who are equally viable leaders will feel the need to say that we don't have to raise up our people by putting down another people. I think that's all we ask.
But now
there is one other
and if that's how he gets attention,
you got to hold on, brother.
Let me just say he gets attention when he speaks against Jews, and not for the self-help message. I don't see the major papers of this country reporting on Louis Farrakhan unless he talks down
Let me
Jews.
ask you, Reverend Fontroy, what about the question of you being a former congressperson? When many of the Jewish organizations were going across the country demanding that he be denounced, what was your feeling as a politician?
Well, my feeling as a politician, I think, is best mirrored by the experience of Congressman Gus Savage. which I think goes more to the point of the gentleman's topic sentence there, where he was set upon in his last election, as you may recall, with Jewish support of an opponent of his in his district, in a situation where, as I recall, 80 to 90% of the resources that he was getting to run against Gus Savage came from the Jewish community outside of the district. And it is that kind of development, I think, that causes the resentment and the feeling that others are trying to pick our leaders for us. Of course, Gus handled it very well in that he campaigned vigorously and won his district re-election. On the question of Mr. Farrakhan and the efforts that were made to separate him and isolate him as a black leader during that period, I simply say that it had no effect upon me. It had very little effect upon many of us in the Congress. Our view, or my view, is that Louis Farrakhan is perhaps the most knowledgeable person in what we call comparative religions. That has been my privilege to know. He does, I think, make salient points with respect to black self-help, and at times, I think, falls into the hands of media.
But there were a number of black politicians who indeed did distance themselves. Jesse Jackson being one of them.
Because he made anti-Semitic remarks. There's no question about that. You can say what you like, and even if you believe it,
I can't ask you guys again to give him an opportunity to speak.
If you believe that he didn't say it, that's the world did hear those anti-Semitic remarks. This is America, and with all respect, Reverend, when you discuss Gus Savage and money coming out for his opponent from outside the district, what would one say when money came from all over this country to defeat Duke in Mississippi? For the very same, in America, we support the people who support our interests, and in that case, we were supporting someone who was supporting our interest as we support him in Mississippi against Duke. Now, perfectly right and perfectly an American black power can go anywhere in this country to support their interests. And I would suggest one other thing. In asking other leaders to respond and give an opinion, if I ever heard, or any organization that I belong to, anyone and represented here at this table or anywhere else, heard a racist remark made publicly by a Jewish leader made about the blacks, he would be denounced in public in every media area you can, be it on television, radio, and the newspapers. You would hear it outright. There's just no question about it, and there's nothing to demand that.
I hate to do this because we finally got started, but I got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we're coming back to you, and I think we have the results of the 900 poll, and this is from across the country. Do you think a partnership between blacks and Jews is necessary? And yes is 70% and 30% no. This audience obviously would not agree with that, but that that could be indeed that this is the feeling across the country, because this is where the numbers are coming from. And I promise you, folks, we'll stick around and talk to you after the show. Please, Rabbi, go ahead.
I have a lot of respect for Walter Farmer. We've been together many times, and but I must say I disagree with him that Louis Farrakhan is a great expert on comparative religion. I don't think, again, I want to share Letty's point of view. I don't think you advance one's own religion by defaming another's religion. I think the way to do it is you affirm everyone's religion and be the best Muslim or the best Jew or the best Christian one can be. So I would have some problems with that.
And may I just say, I'm really made very uncomfortable by the amount of hatred in this room. I mean, we're all human beings.
Listen, folks, you're going to have to allow people to have their say.
This, okay? I feel an enormous amount of hatred, and I feel a lack of willingness to respect and listen. We're all doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can.
Okay.
And to be called a white devil, And this is not a forum that elicits. Nothing happened here to elicit that kind of invective.
Okay, folks, you're going to have to keep it comfortable for me. Yes, ma'am.
Direct question for Michelle Harris.
Please.
I know you spoke of coalition and bonding.
Harriet Michelle, you mean?
Yes,
Is that who you want to
Harriet
direct?
Michelle,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And my direct question is to her. When you spoke of bonding and a coalition among Jews and blacks, my question is, if that is the feeling here, why would you refuse to get on the panel with Dr. Jeffries of CCNY?
No one at home is going to know what you're talking about, ma'am. And let me just say so they won't. Just a minute. I've got to explain to the folks at home so they won't try to figure out what's going on.
Right.
There was a question. There's a gentleman here from the City College that a number of the people on the audience wanted on the panel. And as we said and suggested to the gentleman who raised the question, the assumption is always that we did not ask certain people. Now, I will say, and I don't know if the producers called him or not, but there were other people asked. Some could not make it because of prior engagements and things of that nature. So what sits before you always isn't what we started out to try to get you. So go ahead. I think I just wanted people at home to understand. So please give her your question. We're running out of time.
My question was, why did she refuse to come on the panel if Dr. Jeffries sat in on the panel? We are here.
All right, let her answer.
I don't know where you got that information. I did not produce this program. I was asked to come. I agreed to come, and I'm here.
But did you not agree
I agreed to come, and I am here.
But did you
I did not select the panel. I am not part of this station. I am not part of this production company. I did not select.
And I tell you what we'll do, Miss. I tell you what we'll do. We're going to allow you because I'm not going to have this going back and forth. If you want to hang around after the show,
what I'm saying, this is
ma'am, I've got to go over on this side. I promise you, we're not going to shrug you off. Okay?
All right.
Yes, sir.
Hotep, brothers and sisters.
Go ahead, sir.
To clarify an issue which I think should be quickly clarified, and to project maybe some serious discussion on these important issues at a later date, we need a forum where African peoples get together and really map out an agenda for the 21st century without having this question of other peoples and their interests brought into the picture until we clearly see what we need for ourselves. But to clarify this question that has been raised, I was invited to be a part of the program. I was disinvited, and I was told that Miss Harriet Michelle would not appear on the program with me. That is what I was told. But we will continue to have these dialogues.
Just a minute, folks. Just a minute.
We will
Let him
continue
finish.
to have a meaningful dialogue on the question of our agendas, and hopefully you'll pay tune to City College organizing some of these things. And the next week or two, we will be having some serious discussions on those issues that we as African peoples need to develop. We need an alliance between ourselves before we talk about an alliance between others.
Now, let me ask you something. Let me ask you something before you step away. Let me ask you something before you step away. Let me ask you something before you step away, because, and I'm being told a different thing in my earpiece. I'm as lost as the audience as to whether or not it happened. But let me ask you this. One of the things that we as black people have heard for quite some time is
Brother,
just as
I came back from Africa.
No, let me just ask you. Let me ask you this question.
To be part of a taping.
Let me ask you.
They even told me they would tape me.
Sir, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. I'm trying to ask you a question because that's something that you'll have to deal with some other people.
I'm not going to deal with it.
Fine.
It's a non-issue.
Are you going to deal with? Can I ask you this question? My question to you is there enough of an anger in the black community now to start, as we have said for so long, to, amongst ourselves, get up and deal with the issues?
I don't think we need to describe it as anger. There's reality in the African community. There's a consciousness that we have to be involved around our values, our interests, and our principles before we can talk about any alliance with anybody.
This side, yes, sir. Would you like to respond at all? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What I would like to talk about is this. Basically, that we all are being governed by a certain reality in this world. Now, that young lady said there that she was offended because somebody called her a devil, and that there was a lot of hatred in this audience. Excuse me, I'm speaking, right? All right. That goes to show that you are thinking for us again. You don't know how these people feel. They're only expressing a certain reality that has been happening to us for over 400 years. How would you feel if somebody called you a swatzer or a nigger for a long period of time? Now you know how that feels. Now, as far as you're claiming that you'll know your history, right? Because y'all do study, you'll go to your libraries, you have access to all these books, right? If you know your history, then you will know what your nature is. Your nature is to divide and conquer us. Once black people realize that you will constantly do this to them, then they will be able to understand that they have to get up and do it for themselves. Now, what I have to say is this.
All right, quickly, let me give him a chance to respond.
I'm going to use this as an example. There was a Korean boycott in Flatbush Avenue where all the black people was boycotting the Korean stores, right? Now, what happened is this. They said, do not go to this Korean store. But black people have to realize that if you tell me don't go to that store, then produce a store for me to go. Then I do not have to worry about boycotting anybody because you already produced an environment for me to live for. We have to start clinging together and stop letting these people control us. Because if they here right now, believe me, they already got it in the makings of what they're getting ready to do. And what they are going to do
let me give them an opportunity.
Is only one thing, because I end all my speeches with the scriptures, because the scriptures control all. I'm just going to read this one thing.
No, sir, I got to cut you. No, listen, I'm going to have to give them an opportunity to respond. No, I got to give them an opportunity to respond. I've got time constraints here that just will not allow that. We're not trying to shut you up. I told you before we started you were going to wait till the end. Let me give them an opportunity to respond. Those that really want to hear, I'll stick around.